Hey, it's 3+Kei, and guess who is here? Let me make sure I'm not. Come closer. It's Afton. Look at her. It's Afton right there. Okay. I am 3+Kei. I'm here to encourage you to pursue the smile by prioritizing the Lord, your physical health, and persistent education. This space right here is called the Secret Heart Club. It is for the oddball Christians and the Christ curious. I'm just going to point to her. I don't know if that's the case. And the Christ curious to come together in community, ask your questions, talk about your weird stuff, and continuously point one another upward. There's a song, which Afton knows very well. So here we go. We're going to sing it all together. Afton's going to take us up. Here we go. And
I think I remember how it starts.
Well, hey, Randy. Randy is 10.
Does Randy know what it is?
Randy, let's get to singing. Here we go. Welcome to the Secret Heart Club, everyone. Does it part to bring love, be loved. Hey, we love Jesus at the Secret Heart Club. Bah. And so what we're talking about today, the reason why Afton is here, is we've got some work to do. I spent the week out of town in Montana talking to other nonprofits who do similar work about how they have successfully implemented the community-funded model for their nonprofits and how we can bring that to the James House and to Montana to better serve the foster youth over this way. So that was exciting. There's a few pieces that are missing in the vein of a community funded model. What type of grants do we pursue? What type of donors do we pursue? And the reason why Afton is here, the big question is, how much money do we actually even need? I talk about this ever elusive house and $1 million, but I'll say this, and I'll tell you guys this too. If you have a goal, you have a plan, you have a dream in life, put it on paper and make it make sense. Memorize it so you can tell other people and spread the word, and it adds just like validity to what you're talking about. So it might not be the $1 million check, right? The place we were at, that we were just talking about, one of the places I visited, they have an operational annual budget of $360,000, right? So the James House, Montana probably doesn't need $1 million a year, right? If someone gave me $1 million, what does it get used for? How many forks? How many spoons? Who pays the landscaping and all this sort of stuff? So that's what we're doing. Hi, Akalika? Akalika? Yeah? All right. Cool. So, yeah, that's where we are. I'm going to kind of ignore you guys just a little bit. And we're going to do this part. And Afton has a lot of knowledge on this type of thing. So, I'll get my computer out first.
So we're just talking about what
do I need?
Is that kind of ongoing, not setup costs, ongoing operational costs for running a home where many people live.
Yeah. And also one thing that I use that's been very helpful is Gemini, which is like chat GPT. So we can kind of, I think the last thing I did is still in here. Is this just me?
Doesn't like your double clicking?
No.
It's not responding.
Okay. Alright, well, we'll just kind of do this part right here. While you guys are watching us work, I would be curious, those of you who are watching, when you think of a quality, long-term Christian group home, what would you like to see? Like if you were going to go on a tour to one in your community, what are some what are some programs? What are some facets of the house that you would like to see? Oh, okay. Yeah, this just isn't working.
No, it's not even useful.
Well, we will get a new document up. Oh gosh. What?
Malfunction.
Yeah, let's maybe restart this bad boy. That's a terrible thing. Why would that
Well,
do
why you
that?
figure that out? I mean, I think that one trap, or like, maybe not, one route small nonprofits like sometimes go down that end up and then changing what their mission is and what, all of that drive
Yeah.
is by taking like what their original, more simplified, basic service was,
Mm-hmm.
and running it at the cost that it needs to run that, not, just sustaining that amount is one thing. But when you start seeing, as you get better at gathering money and talking to funders and looking at grants, when you start seeing funding that's not specifically going to fall into your lane, but man, you could also do that thing.
Right.
Then you like create this new little program to appease this funder.
Right.
But now you get the money to run that program. But now, like, instead of $360,000 a year, it's $400,000 a year.
Right.
Because you're maintaining that program. So really trying to think about, like, from the beginning, this is what we're doing.
Yeah.
And that's that. I mean, if we think about we've worked at multiple places, same places together, right? And I think definitely a common theme is like, how did they start, and then where are they now?
Yeah.
So like the one place that I was a director of, when I first started working there, working nights or whatever, the funding was around $360, a little bit more a year to run that program.
Okay.
Right when I started is when they were like, hey, let's do something more, like build the building. So in a 10-year period of time, by the time I left, it was $2+ million a year budget.
Wow.
Right? And so like we were doing more,
right,
but we grew in this exponential way that then created it so like it took more overhead of like more kind of direct positions, more money kind of people, more outreach kind of people. Like it became a fundraising agency more than it was just a home for homeless people, young people. Right? So like it is something you can get into, because you have to remember that the nonprofit world is it's a whole industry. It's a whole industry. Just the money raising part is a whole industry, and that can be a trap. And I think it can really take you away from like what your real mission is. Like I was shocked to find out like how much a director of an organization that I thought was like a locals, putting their money directly to help those people, and then you find out they're making over $100,000 a year. So you're like, are you asking me for money to pay these top executives wages? Are you asking me for money because you need to buy new bedding this year for the people, right? Like, you're really questioning, like, you want it for, like, what you're looking to do, running this Christian organization. I think that would be imperative to keep in mind, that you want your starting budget to be real simple, and you want it to kind of stay that way.
That's really interesting. So both of the places I went are Christian. One's Christian, both are Christian funded. And the one place that we were talking about before we aired, they are heavy on that and very strategic, and actually not even taking everybody's money. Because when they started to do that, like this big church with wealthy people were like, we'll just fund this. but we also want the rules to look like this, and
Mm-hmm.
you know what I mean? And what they found was it restricted the type of kids that could come.
Yeah.
And to your point, what we said was we take homeless kids. So if now we can't,
Mm-hmm.
because you're going to give us 50K,
And this
we'll
is gonna
not take the 50K.
come along with decisions you'll have to make about how you're going to license this group home, whether you're going to become a therapeutic group home so you can build things. Like if
Yeah.
you start making those decisions, then your overhead is increasing just to meet the standards of that licensing.
Yeah.
Or credentialing, not necessarily do those things
Yeah.
equate a better service to who you're providing. It just creates like this whole extra overhead, where
Right.
then like your energy goes into paying for all of that part and not so much directly to the service of the people that you're serving.
The ultimate vision, like if I had it my way in 30 years, what it looks like is a James house in every state with a cap at 4 boys, staffed by local missionaries, attached to a local church. If I really wanted to dream the biggest, it would be like internationally, but all the same, it would be the four, like a 5 or 6 bedroom house, so that there's like one room for the parents, one room for each boy, spare room maybe for a guest or whatever the heck, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
But yeah, I thought about that because I love the idea of like a wilderness program or something like that, but it flies in the face of who the founder is and why the founder is doing it, which is the founder at 16 went into the system, had through just social capital, had the best experience and went to the best group homes, and all I'm doing is duplicating that on a smaller scale. So there's not 12 kids, there's 4 kids.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So,
but I hear you and I hear them saying keep it at that then.
Yeah, keep it
yeah.
at what it's going to be.
Mhm.
And I think like, startup costs are one thing, is different than operational
Yeah.
costs. And so a lot of like figuring out how you're going to start
Mhm.
is going to,
He gave me a
equate to
tip on
what
that, too.
the actual cost is going to be.
Yep.
And but like you keep an open mind that you could find a situation where you're just renting a home to start.
Yeah,
that is
I
a
would really
scenario
like
that
to
can
not
happen.
do that because then you're in somebody else's whim. So what happens if they don't like a thing that happened, somebody spray painted somewhere, whatever,
Yeah.
then out you go.
Right. But that's one way to get something started
Yeah.
and get going on your model.
Mhm.
And then you have a product that you can show donors, and maybe that's how you become,
Yeah.
into property or something. But definitely for operational costs, that's what the first cost, right, is if there's a mortgage, if there's a rent, what is that housing piece, right? Like that's just like your own personal finances. This isn't going to be that much different.
That's not what I meant to do. Shout out to you, Ben. Who's doing that? Somebody's saying something they shouldn't be saying, but haha, we don't know what it is. Ben's the best. Okay, so let's just do one with like, oh, you know what? I have a document actually called, costs, which is more like a,
Yeah, and really for like at this point in time, what you can do, using your AI or whatever, is just figure out what is the average rental for this kind of property, or what is the average mortgage for this kind of property, and you just start with that. And then the idea would be like your your effort would be to get funding to pay it, so that that's not the case, so that there is no mortgage, so there is no, rent or whatever. So you could always look that up later, what that cost would be, just to be like, on average, this is what it would be.
I'm gonna see if it's attached. Number. On my phone, you can talk to it, and it'll be like, yes, the James house is blah, 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 but this is different. Okay. Cost 46 bedroom home near Missoula County. I think it would be like one thing they said, the one guy, when I was talking about like purchasing a home, like how do you get someone to give you a home? And he said we look at it all the time, and people offer at this point, which I think is kind of cool for them, but they're doing what only kind of like what they're doing. And he said churches, small churches go out of business, and they're in the Christian space, it's a good time to get it just like flat out donated or a steep discount because you're already doing a ministry. So that was one advice he gave, was like keep an eye out for.
Yeah, like right now there's a church on South Avenue, way down on South Avenue.
Yeah.
That is for sale.
Really?
Yeah. And I've kept an eye out on a couple different things, because there used to be there was an old CPS worker who was also a pastor.
It's not Rob Lawler.
No. And anyway, his church, he retired and moved to the Flathead, but his church, I remember it was for sale for a while. I always thought that would actually be a great place for either a group home or just like any kind of nonprofit, like Boys and Girls Club or something like that. I always thought they should buy it because there was the little house, right?
Yeah.
That he would have lived in, that the pastor lived
Right.
in. But then there's also like the full
facility.
church where, where they did all the things and all the different rooms where you had activities and stuff. And
yeah,
I was like, that's the perfect kind of combo.
It's on South and
It's on South Avenue, almost before you get. It's before you get to the fort.
I'll go drive.
Yeah. I just know about it because one of my kids, when they were in early Head Start, it was in the basement of that, because they try to find cheap places or free places to run those things.
Ben and I just went to a church. They have a whole daycare going on.
Yeah, so I'm familiar with the property, and then I saw it come up as for sale, and I was like, oh, there's a lot to that property. It would be something you could do a lot of things with. But yeah, I think that is a good idea to think about churches.
I'll go by it tomorrow. I'll put it in my phone when we're done here. I was looking at houses today in Big Fork and Charlotte, the waterfront, on a waterfront. It's like, maybe. You never know. How do you even get someone just with a business plan? Like, how would you even go to a bank and be like...
Yeah, just like a business. So, they're not going to look at it that much different just from like, I'm starting a new business. I don't currently have the business, but this is what I want it to be like. They're going to do the same kind of risk analysis of like, how much have you looked into this? Is this feasible? What are your funding sources? So you would probably want to have at least the beginnings of like who your regular funding sources were, or some sort of income, before going to like try to get a mortgage or something along those lines. But
I have a question.
Yeah.
The second place I went to was very helpful, and they just told me who their donors are and who my best bet is to, in Montana, that are just Christian donors. They do a lot of Christian funding.
Yeah.
In submitting for a grant, do you just tell them the idea that you have and what you have, and then they just give you money and you put it in the bank account, and then you have that? So this is kind of exciting. So
sometimes that's how it goes. Sometimes it doesn't go that way. Sometimes it's like, okay, yeah, we will grant this to you if you could figure out this other piece of financing.
Right.
And you kind of have to present that to the bank.
Right.
But like it is not all that complicated for purchasing a home, as long as you can show how you are going to be paying that mortgage.
Right.
Because the property is the asset, right?
Right.
So if you can't pay it, the bank just gets the asset.
Right.
So the risk is lower that way, but they are going to want to see that there's some reserves and that kind of thing. And that's something you'll also want to build into any kind of budget, is reserves.
3 to 6 months.
Yeah, that's probably equates to kind of the same thing. I think, if I remember correctly, some of our federal funding required 30% of the value of the property to be kept in reserve.
Yeah.
With the idea, because it was an apartment sort of situation, so they wanted to know that we could make repairs as needed and replace appliances as needed. And so that was the idea, is if you had a 30% of, but you don't have that necessarily starting out. It's just something you build up to. Just like personal finances. Once you have your basic bills paid, then you make decisions about what you save for emergency, what you save for vacations or furniture, new car, all that kind of stuff. And that would just be like your emergency. It's just the reserves. So then after whatever that property payment is, what's tied to that property payment is always insurance.
Yes.
So that would be something for you to look up to, because that's going to be another kind of fixed cost, is what it costs to insure. That changes all the time. It probably has changed since 10 years ago when I was in charge of such a thing. But we had it written in like our financial bylaws that every 3 years we would go out and get new bids on any kind of service like that. So I had to go through that process multiple times of reaching out to different insurance agents and having them look up the cost and what it was to cover the property and liability and all of that kind of stuff. And I want to say that it was running us like $700 a month, but that was but at that point in time, that was a very big asset, right? Like we had housing for 16 individuals and maybe 40 people all together, right? Like it was a lot going on there. So that would be something that you'd have to find out, the insurance that you're required to have. That could also goes up as you if you were to have a therapist, then you have to pay that liability insurance. And it can get complicated as you grow if you don't keep it super simple, because the costs increase. So then housing after that is just like any home. You've got a power bill, you've got a water bill, you've got internet, and those are all not going to be any different than, there isn't necessarily extra business cost to those basic things.
Right.
It would just be whatever area you're at, what the rates are at, and what you'd have to budget for.
So Medicaid reimburses the $190 per month in a therapeutic group home, and I asked what it's for, and it's like all this other stuff, but not for the room and board, the
Right.
rent, utilities, or the food.
Right. So for a therapeutic group home, I know a lot about this because I worked for the Medicaid Bureau for 5 years. But so for a therapeutic group home, that licensing has kind of a higher standard now, so it's not, there was a time where there was just group homes. About 15 years ago or so, it changed to where, like, for licensing purposes, the state moved towards having, if you were going to be a therapeutic group home and be billing for that service, you had to meet a higher standard.
Right.
So there was whole new licensing guidelines, and those included, essentially, you have to become a mental health center. And so some of the high-end parts of that is that you have to have a medical director, and you have to have somebody who's able to do medication management.
We do not want that.
You do not, so then it's just a different expense.
Yeah.
Now, so it's not that maybe what I learned through my licensing process at the place I worked at was that, because I was like, how the hell are we going to make that happen? Well, those individuals do not have to be employees. You can just contract with them, and their obligation to you in that contract is pretty minimal. And so, for instance, it could just be that they review policies once a year, that they give X amount of hours in training to your staff, that they're available under like certain conditions where you may need extra assistance, and maybe you're just paying them $500 a month or something like that.
Let me run this by you.
So, but it's still, that is an expense that you have to maintain. And then if historically in Montana, physicians don't stay one place for very long.
Right.
Because they're high demand, and there's always so it's like, it is a risk because you have to have somebody.
Well, so that leads me to my other, when I met with, and I see you, Ben, I'm going to ask this. Well, let's just ask Ben's question. I wonder if starting the James House as a ministry would help. That's exactly why, Ben, I'm trying to tie it to a church.
That's been my suggestion this whole time. It's like, this is a ministry, and if you stay like with that on the forefront of the conversation that you're having with donors and stuff like that, you're going to stay true to what you're doing, because it is a ministry.
Yeah.
And be really clear that this is that's what you're doing.
And so in that vein, a woman, it was actually the old clinical director at ADI, and she's the one that came up with that app. That's what she's doing at the thing. Anyway, when I was talking to her, she was like, you should just start a group home. She said, she said, you're starting a foster home. So you go get a house and then raise these boys. And I was like, no, not me. You know what I mean? Maybe initially, I don't know. But the idea is that they would have parents, and this would continue forevermore on a 4-year, even a 3-year cycle with local missionaries and this type of thing. So in the, I was thinking about medication management specifically earlier, in the way that ideally, super controversial, I'm sure, these boys just aren't even on medication in the first place. And then if they are... Right.
Yeah, and that's the thing. This is just like from, if you're a therapeutic group home, you have to have a physician that can do that.
Yeah, yeah.
And so this is why this is probably not the way you're going to want to go. The other thing is then you're licensed by age. Like, there's different ages. So then by 18, that's it. Yeah. And that might not also fit into what you're doing.
Yeah.
Then, so the funding, the $190 per day, that's the current Medicaid rate. It changes every year. That goes to pay for the therapeutic part. So besides a medical director or med management, when you get down below that, you have to have a clinical director who is a licensed therapist of some sort. Now that clinical director can also be the therapist. So it could be one person that fulfills all of those roles in a
Right.
situation like this.
Yeah.
But as we see, the agencies we've worked for, as they get bigger, then you have all these extra roles that starts
Right.
costing you
Right.
quite a bit in salaries. But you would essentially have to have somebody licensed who is going to be doing therapy with those kids. And so
Right.
the expectation for this level of care that the 190 is going to pay for is that the kids are getting individual therapy, they're attending group therapies, and they're getting access to family therapy. And so those are that would be what the 190 is going to pay for.
Gotcha. So this is not.
And the difference between, like, you could always, like, not license as a therapeutic group home, have a regular group home, and then just have an individual person who comes in and does those therapies, and they bill for that, and you don't have that overhead. That kind of model does exist.
That's what I was
But the idea of the
thinking.
therapeutic group home part is that the whole model every day, even when the therapist isn't there, is that it's therapeutic. And so
This isn't
it
that.
requires a
Yeah.
treatment plan, you know in detail these rules of
Yeah.
how often what has to be in the treatment plan, how often it's
Yeah,
reviewed,
right.
all of that kind of stuff. That's a lot. And so that's what the 190 per day is paying for the therapeutic services, which would be all of the things we've just talked about. So then that's not going to pay for the mortgage or rent, the power, the food, the daily operation stuff, and just what it costs to care for
Yeah.
a teenager. It doesn't cover that. So the way our system of care is set up is that when a kid goes to a therapeutic group home, they get approval, they get prior authorization from Medicaid, and Medicaid will say, "Yeah, you got X amount of days. This is what we pay you." And then that is typically not enough to run the group home,
Right.
supposedly. And I'm going to say that's because these places have this giant overhead of a whole corporation that they're
Right.
also paying for.
Right.
Because I would argue that you can operate a group home with a decent amount of money, like at 190 per day. You could definitely make that happen.
Yeah, that
right?
equals
Like,
to
yeah.
277.
So the way it is now is that families are charged the room and board rate, which is currently $63 and something cents a day. Those rates also go up every year. They're established by the legislator, the increases. So that's a lot. So that's a barrier, right? Like, families can't come up with that.
Right.
So then that was a barrier. Kids weren't getting into group homes. So there is room and board funding now available through the state of Montana in a variety of ways, through Children's Mental Health Bureau. And so what happens is the family applies for that funding separate from Medicaid. So once the kid gets accepted, Medicaid says, yes, you can have this many days. Then the family applies for the room and board funding, which is based on income. It's pretty, like, we want to use it. We don't want it to be a barrier for families going in. So it's pretty accessible these days. So that's what then pays the daily room and board rate. So then you really are talking about that you're around $250 a day that you're getting per kid at a therapeutic group home. And that's your income source. And of course, most of these agencies also fundraise outside of that for additional things. So not deciding to not become a therapeutic group home, you don't have to worry about all those extra expenses, but you also don't get to tap into this funding source.
And because therapeutic group home, your cap's at 12 months. You get that waiver 18 months.
Yeah, so the
And
way
we're
therapeutic group
4
homes,
years.
there's 120 days to start, and
Yeah.
then every 90 days they review again. And there isn't a cap. It could, if there was demonstrated need, it could keep going on indefinitely. And we certainly have had kids in group homes for up to 4 years. It's not likely to happen. We have a whole system and contracts in place to review those things to make sure that's not happening. Because in general, our system of care, state philosophy, as well as the federal philosophy nationwide, is that kids do not do well in these institutions forever, and we should be doing everything we can to be making sure we're getting them out as quickly as possible.
Right. But what it ends up looking like
And
is here's another group home and here's another group
exactly.
home.
And this is what
and we're trying to
coming in.
Yeah, like here there's this kid. Listen,
Right,
they're
that's right.
14. If
It's
you find someone to adopt them, great.
Yeah.
But the likelihood of that happening, super low.
Right. And so what these kids do well, they maintain, they get done, and they don't have a place to go still. So then they have to go to another place and another place. And then they have this trauma that they're gaining by being in these safe situations with different people, exposure to it all.
And to
it's not good. So this is the alternative, right?
This
so
is the alternative.
You would not, for lots of reasons, be becoming a therapeutic group home. But these are good, I guess, ideas to think about what it might cost per day. And so as you're figuring out the budget stuff, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
The other funding sources for group homes, because there are regular group homes. It's called congregate care. That are not therapeutic. They're licensed.
Hey, Pablo. Hola. Pablo's in Chile.
Oh, okay.
And hi, Sherry. I think Sherry's a teacher.
So there are group homes, right? Like there are kids that are in state care that've been through all the therapeutic rooms, the hospitals. They're not going to find a permanent home for an adoption or something like that.
Yeah.
And there are group homes throughout the state. I'm not all that familiar with them, but I do know that they exist. And where maybe Child and Family Services places a kid there, and that's where they're going to live until they find them an adoptive permanent home or they turn 18. There's places that like the JPO, so juvenile justice, will place kids that they also can't get them to go home because maybe their home environment's not safe. That exists, but it has decreased like exponentially over the last 10 years because the federal guidelines that those agencies work under, so CFSD, justice, that their rules above them have changed. That says no, we don't want kids in these kinds of cares. If you're sticking a kid in a group home forever, you have to justify it in so many ways. Like you don't just be like, we're done with this kid goes here now. Like they've really making that so that's not really an option for agencies anymore. So I mean, potentially the kind of home that James Home is a place where Child and Family Services is like, we're going to place them there, and we're going to pay this rate. And there is on our pay matrix from the state that you can find what the rate is.
I'm gonna back up out of here, guys. Thanks for joining the discussion. James House, definitely a ministry. For one thing, guys, if you could do me a favor, hop over to PursueTheSmile.com. There will be plenty of updates there until the miraculous James House, Montana website flourishes. Learn more about the James House, again, PursueTheSmile.com. If you have any feedback, input at any point, I would always love to hear it. You can email me. Super excited about this journey. Thanks for being a part of it. PursueTheSmile.com. I am 3PlusKei, and I'll talk to you guys later.